one, telling you a little bit about who we are at the Rothman Institute. We've been around 30 years. Our mission is to support, promote, and research entrepreneurship with a special focus on family and veteran businesses. Our programs are our Family Business Alliance, where we have a membership where we provide everything from coaching to consulting to other information sessions for our family business members. We have student programs. We've been doing both of those for over 30 years. We have a program called Veterans Launching Ventures, which is really entering its 11th year. It's become a national program. We have in this season's class about 40 people from 25 different states. We're doing more and more articles, research, and policy around entrepreneurship and small business. We've done some strategic planning for businesses. We're doing a lot more with urban businesses to really help them recover through the pandemic. And we're expanding to have a sales diversity training and an executive certification program. So we're doing a lot now. We wouldn't exist without our supporters, our sponsors, and TD Bank Charitable Foundation has been a very, very loyal supporter. Provident Bank is a tremendous supporter of the Rothman Institute. SunTrust and CIANJ, Tony Russo, I think, may be joining us a little later, the CEO of CIANJ, who really gives us some insight on some of the legislation. One of the reasons this is important and we're doing these Zooms is that entrepreneurship is more important than ever. And it's really the key to bridging this very divided country. It's one of the few things that people all agree. And so we're doing more and more with public policy to support entrepreneurship. And we created this program called Entrepreneur Zones that we're working on in TNEC. We're part of a working group with the state to do this. And actually programs are starting in Philadelphia and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and some other places as well. We've started something called Family Business Week, where on the 4th week in October, we're encouraging people to support family businesses, especially that week, but really throughout the year. Our website talks more about it. We have an opportunity for people to buy gift cards for restaurants to really support them as they're struggling with this pandemic. We have a streamed TV show called Family Business World, which you'll find on rvntv.tv every Thursday at 10 a.m. or 8 p.m. We have the shows, as we'll have this show, on our YouTube channel. This is our Family Business Fridays. As I mentioned, our Veterans Launching Ventures program, more information about that is www.veteranbusinessworld. That's for any veteran or their spouse to really help them develop a business plan so they can really get their business going, and we really help to mentor them through that process and beyond. And this is our YouTube channel where we have over 7,400 subscribers, well over 100 videos. We record videos like today's session, and that will be posted on this. So you can, if you miss it or you miss a portion of it, you can always go there for incredible information from people like Joseph, who are experts in their field. We're also known for our New Jersey Family Business of the Year awards. We had our 28th this year. Laura Mashtaler from Black Swan Espresso in Newark was our new Family Business of the Year winner. Our under 10 million in sales, Dennis McCullough from McCullough Contracting, and our over 10 million in sales is Mike Seitel from Norwalt Design. So we're looking for nominations. We're looking for people. So our 29th, which will be in October of this year. So with that, I want to introduce Joseph Maddaloni from Schenck, Price, Smith, and King. So Joseph, how are you?
I'm doing well today. How about yourself, Doctor?
Doing well, doing very, very well. Very, very well. So you want me to punch up? I'll punch up your screen. Oops. Hold a second. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
There we go. Okay, great. First of all, let me tell everyone how pleased I am and honored to be a part of this program and have the ability to do a presentation. Our firm is working closely with FDU on a number of initiatives. This is one of them, and we are very pleased with the relationship and look forward to continuing to work with the university on matters of this nature and as well as others. So I want to thank Susan and Dr. Caldwell for inviting me to participate, and I'm happy to be here. So today we're going to talk primarily about vaccinations and COVID. As Dr. Cole has indicated, the pandemic globally or generally has had a tremendous impact on the workplace. From the moment that the first executive orders were issued in whatever state that you're operating in, right up until the present day, when there is an effort to get vaccinations out into people's arms, it has had a tremendous and significant impact on the workplace. And as an employment lawyer who represents management, so I generally deal with the owners and operators of businesses, helping them navigate the waters of the mountain of regulations that are imposed upon business operators. Our office has been very, very busy during the course of the last year. It's almost a year now that we were dealing with a pandemic, in helping employers understand what their rights and obligations are, and also helping them understand what employees' rights and obligations are, as we all try to deal with this continuing pandemic. So obviously, the latest issue to come forward now is the vaccines are being manufactured and being distributed, and so employers are now confronted with the issue of what do we do with the vaccines? Do we require employees to be vaccinated? Do we encourage employees to be vaccinated? Do we not take a stance at all on vaccinations? So what we thought would be useful today is to provide you some guidance and some information on the vaccination programs and on your rights as employers. All right, so just recently, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, which is the federal agency, those of you that haven't had the misfortune of having to deal with the EEOC and don't know who it is, I'll offer you just a brief explanation of it. The EEOC is the federal agency that is empowered to enforce the federal anti-discrimination laws, including Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act, and as noted up here in the first paragraph, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. The EEOC enforces other laws, but these are the ones that are most significant for purposes of vaccination. The EEOC's guidance addresses a number of pressing questions posed by employers and employees alike regarding the vaccine. And what we're going to do here is go through some of the more important takeaways from the EEOC guidance. The administration of vaccine to employees is not considered a medical examination for purposes of the American with Disabilities Act. So therefore, it may generally be required by employers under federal law. All right, so let me break that down for you.
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah.
All right, so what that means is that employers, in just the bare base, guidance purposes, employers can require employees to get vaccinated. Okay, let me repeat that. Employers can require, you can mandate your workforce get vaccinated.
So I'm on a school board. Just let me, again, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to ask you questions.
Fine.
So school boards, so I'm on a school board. So school districts can mandate that teachers have vaccines before they come back to the classroom.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Now, and so that's why the vaccination not being deemed a medical examination, it takes it out of the prohibition against the medical examinations, mandatory medical examinations under the ADA, and which is why the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has said it's proper for you to mandate the vaccines. Okay. Now, there's more to that. All right. Although it's not considered a medical examination, all right, pre-screening questionnaires given to employees by an employer in connection with a vaccination may implicate the ADA's provision on disability-related inquiries. In such a case, the employer would need to demonstrate that the pre-screening questions are job-related and consistent with business necessity. All right, so what that means is one of the exceptions, and we'll get into it a little further in the presentations, there are two exceptions to you mandating an employee get vaccinated, right? Employees who have a medical condition, all right, that would be triggered by the vaccine, right, can be accepted from a requirement that they get vaccinated, or if the employee has a religious objection. All right, those are the two ways that an employee can object to receiving the vaccination if it's required by their employer. All right. If you're
So,
going,
Joseph, let me
Sure,
ask you that. So the religious, do you have to prove the religious? Do you have to prove that you're a member of a particular religion, or can someone just say, I'm the Church of the XYZ?
no, it has to be it's got to be a sincerely held, bona fide religious belief. All right.
Okay.
And there are several religions that are recognized for,
Right.
for their stance on vaccinations. I believe the Latter-day Saints, is one of them. So there are several religions that the law already recognizes because it's been vetted through the courts that have where you can raise a sincerely held bona fide religious belief against the vaccinations. All right. So it can't just be, someone says, I don't want to do it because of my religion. There really has to be some proof of that and some way to establish it. Okay.
Good.
For the medical exception, you can ask your employees to complete a questionnaire as to whether they have any medical related conditions that might be triggered by the vaccine. Now, part of the problem that we're experiencing with that is we still don't know what the contraindications are for the vaccine. Obviously, there are going to be folks that have allergic reactions to it. There may be folks who have other types of reactions to it that prohibit them from taking the vaccine. So we're still so early in the stage of this thing being distributed that we don't have a clear sense from, on the legal side, all right, what the medical exemptions will be, right? But notwithstanding, employees are going to claim that they're not going to take it for medical reasons. If you encounter that as part of your mandatory vaccination program, all right, then you've got an obligation to entertain or engage the employee in a discussion about whether a reasonable accommodation can be provided so that the employee can continue to work and not be in violation of your mandate that the employee get vaccinated or all employees get vaccinated. Okay. That discussion obviously is going to result in one of two things happening. All right. If there is a way you can accommodate the employee that doesn't pose an unreasonable hardship on your business or result in a threat of serious harm to the balance of your workforce, then under the law, you've got an obligation to give that employee the reasonable accommodation.
Right.
If you can't make that reasonable accommodation, then the employee cannot work, obviously, because they're not getting vaccinated and they're in violation of your policy.
Right.
Right. I'm finding it, the employers that I'm dealing with, for instance, I do a lot of work with home care agencies. They put caregivers out in private homes to care for the elderly and the folks who are recuperating from surgery and whatnot. For those types of employers, there is no accommodation that can be offered. If the caregivers are required to be vaccinated and they don't get vaccinated, there's nowhere that you could put the caregiver that is going to, satisfy the reasonable accommodation. So in that instance, those employers are faced with the decision to terminate the caregiver, right? Or I guess you can put the caregiver out on unpaid leave. They can collect unemployment or whatnot. But, that's one of the downsides to requiring the vaccination is you have to be prepared to deal with the consequences of someone not being able to take it for medical reasons, not being able to take it for religious reasons, both of which will require you to determine whether there's an accommodation that can be achieved. Okay. Or third alternative is the employee refuses to take it. Right. And then what are you going to do with those employees?
Right.
Okay. So,
Joseph,
sure, Doctor.
Yeah, so one, I normally say we don't, we want slides with 3 bullet points. We don't want this, but the stuff you have here is so important. And so people are asking, is it okay? Can we share this with people? Because I think the language is so important.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. You can reach out to me. So dcaldwell@fdu.edu if you'd like a copy of these slides, and we'll make sure we get them to you. Because, as I said, normally we make them pretty and so on, but this is the language is so important in this. So I appreciate you doing this. So,
well, usually what I'll do is, I typically don't provide this type of detail.
Right.
All right. I'll reduce these entries to a smaller entry, and then I'll spend more time talking about it. But this stuff is so important.
Yeah.
And so hot off the press
Yeah.
that I thought it would be more beneficial to your group, your participants, if they actually had the language.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, because it provides them the significant guidance. And what I've done here was I've kind of reduced the guidance.
Mhm.
The EEOC guidance itself is multiple pages. It goes on and on and on and on at a web page. So I've kind of culled out of there the takeaway points.
Wonderful.
All right, these are the things.
This is fantastic.
These are the things that as an owner or operator of a business, this is what you need to really think about as you're making your decision. Okay. So let's switch the slide and see what we got on the next page.
Okay.
Right. We talked about reasonable accommodations, sincerely held religious belief. Employees and present prove that they have received the COVID-19. Use again, so sheds for how employees must be structured employee policies. All right, so some of the things you need to consider, and I don't know how many I'm finding in my practice, there is less desire amongst employers to mandate the vaccine. Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Not most employers, while they believe the vaccine is effective and they think that their employees and everyone should get it, they're reluctant at this point to take the step of requiring employees to get it.
Right.
All right. Now, I'm going to predict as the vaccine becomes more and more available and we hear that it is safe and we find out that the contraindications from it are not severe, aside from anyone who may have an allergic reaction similar to those who may have an allergic reaction to other vaccines, right? I think then employers will get more comfortable with requiring their employees to get vaccinated. The workforce itself is generally opposed to mandatory vaccinations. They don't want their employers to tell them they have to get vaccinated. All right. And so employers are reacting to a large extent to what they're hearing from their employees. Right. But if you are going to go ahead and mandate that your employees get vaccinated, then as the guidance says here, you should have a policy in place that governs how the vaccination is going to work. All right. When it should be done, where it's going to be done. You may want to mandate that consider using a pharmacy or other third-party healthcare provider. There are in the home care industry where I do a lot of work. The industry has set up vaccination points and have entered into agreements with with pharmacies, either Walgreens or CVS, so that employees can get either tested or vaccinated there when the vaccine becomes more widely available. Right now, the location is being kind of tightly controlled, but I think you're going to see in the coming months or weeks, that's going to loosen up. And because in order for us to get the vaccine out and in the arms of people, we're going to have to loosen the distribution mechanism. So you're going to see Walmart and CVS and Walgreens and the Medi centers are going to be. I'm going to tell you, I'm predicting they're going to be locations where people are going to be able to get the vaccine. So your policy should cover things like that. You're going to need to educate your workforce, right? As I indicated, people are generally reluctant to take the vaccine right now. Not that they don't believe it's a good thing. Not that they don't want to fight COVID, but it was produced in a rapid manner, and notwithstanding everyone's seal of approval through the FDA, people have concerns about the safety of it.
Right.
So if you are going to mandate it, you're going to need to help educate your workforce, educate your supervisors and your managers on the benefits of it, on the safety of it, on the efficacy of it, so that they can help encourage or persuade the employees not to be opposed to it. Because
so let me ask, so Joseph, one thing about policy. So if you're a small business or you're a school district or you are, how long do the policies have to place before they be in place before they start? Can you do it immediately? Can someone? And the other question is, do you help businesses develop those policies?
Absolutely. Answer your second question first is yes, absolutely. That's largely, I mean, what we do as employment lawyers. We help businesses develop policies. Most businesses nowadays will have a policy manual in place already that governs a lot of issues in the workplace. But something like this that comes up unanticipated, unexpected, no one has a policy dealing with COVID,
Right.
So yes, so we would help folks. And I mean, we spent a lot of time early on in the pandemic helping employers develop protocols for how you bring people back to work. What to do when they get here, how to treat them in the workplace, what do you need to do to keep people safe. Okay. A lot of businesses are working remotely, right? Remote operations pose an entirely different set of consequences for employers, from everything from tracking time worked if they're hourly employees that are entitled to overtime, and you have to track their time worked, to potential workers' compensation issues. If somebody's working at home and has a fall or suffers an injury at home, that triggers workers' compensation because technically they're working. Okay, so these are issues. I'm going to tell you, these are issues that will, in my opinion, permanently impact the workplace, even once we get COVID under control.
So let me ask a couple of. So the second that I have a small business, I work with you, I put my policy in my manual, then it becomes policy. You don't have to, obviously school boards, you have to vote on it and approve it, but the
Correct.
policy goes into place immediately.
Effective immediately.
So the second thing that you said, which is interesting, because at FDU we're working from home. So workers' comp, so the claims are going to go up. So if I trip and fall and I'm at home, is that can be a workers' comp claim?
If you're in the process of working while you're at home and you get up from your desk and twist your leg or twist your knee or whatever, that's a workers' comp claim. You're working at home. You're on the clock.
Wow. That's
right. Now, if you're working at home and you leave your work area and go into the kitchen to make a sandwich and happen to, slip on a banana peel, different story. Okay. But if you're actually in the process of working, sitting at your desk and, and something happens, just fall while you're getting out of your chair or whatnot, that's a workers' comp claim.
Interesting. So this is really, if you have a business, this is important information.
Absolutely.
It costs you millions of dollars.
Like I said, even aside from the vaccination stuff, it's important. The issue of whether an employee who contracts COVID arguably in the workplace is entitled to file a workers' comp claim. That is going to be one of the more hotly contested issues from a legal standpoint. Now, in New Jersey passed a law that provides a presumption for first responders.
Mhm.
Those folks are on the front lines dealing with the COVID.
Mhm.
For those folks, if they get COVID while at work, it's presumed that it was work related, and therefore they can file a claim for workers' compensation.
Wow.
Okay. For other employees who are not in that designated group of essential first responders and under the statute, it becomes a guessing game. So
Right.
if your employees, if one of your employees catches the virus or tests positive for the virus, there's nothing stopping that employee from claiming they got it at work.
Right. Right.
Okay. The insurance companies are really, no one knows how to deal with this. No one knows, because it's the first time we've ever dealt with it in this kind of a magnitude. How do you prove it's a work-related illness? Right?
Right.
How, you're, in order for the employee to be able to establish they got it in the workplace, the employee would have to show that it was in fact contracted there. Right. And because this thing is so highly contagious, that's a very, very difficult thing to establish.
Wow. We're getting some chats, and this is they're really loving this information. So workers' comp has been a challenge. So I used to be deputy commissioner, Department of Community Affairs, and I had so I was a kind of chief operating officer, and I remember two women went into an elevator. The elevator moved a little bit. The other one said it was no big deal. One person got, not only did they get accommodations to be on the first floor, they got time off. It was the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Workers' comp is really a real difficult thing for big businesses and small businesses.
Exactly. Now, so let me just turn turn the issue for you. So I many employers, when they hear about the workers' comp part of it, get upset for some of the reasons that you've just stated. Oh, workers' comp is going to explode, and my rate's going to go up and whatnot. But on the other side, you have to keep in mind, let's assume an employee again alleges that he or she got COVID in the workplace,
Right.
and it's not deemed to be workers' compensatable or not deemed to be a workers' comp issue, right? That employee then has the right to sue the employer civilly, right? And can claim, I've got COVID in the workplace because you were negligent. All right. If it's a workers' comp claim, right, workers' comp bars an employee from suing the employer for any injury related to the work.
Oh, interesting.
So there's what they call the civil suit bar. So an employee who does get a workers' comp claim filed and approved can't then sue the employer for negligence for catching COVID in the workplace.
Right.
So there is a benefit to having it under the workers' comp umbrella.
Right.
Because then you don't have to deal with lawsuits from your employees who would claim you didn't have the proper protocols in place.
Right. So two questions we've gotten. One was, if you require me to take the vaccine and I get sick from the vaccine, is that a workers' comp claim?
I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes, it is. If your employer is requiring you to do it as a condition of your employment and you get an illness as a result of it, I would claim it's a workplace illness. Yes.
Yep. Another question is, Josephina, she's an economic expert who works on these damage analysis. She's actually an expert court witness. These claims can be financially draining to small business, especially if a claim of COVID contract in the workplace can be tied up to a wrongful employment action. Can you speak something about that?
Well, sure. Again, it goes back to the potential exposure to the employer.
Yeah.
All right. So if the employer, so let's put it in a wrongful or negligent hiring context. All right. Let's assume that I hire someone, and nowadays, a pre-hired screening is likely going to include COVID testing. But
Right.
So let's assume, for sake of argument, that I hire an employee who I don't properly test for COVID, which you can do because it's considered to be a public health emergency. So I don't pre-test that person for COVID, after I extend an offer of employment, right? That person that comes into the workplace with COVID and infects my workforce, all right? In the absence of the workers' comp bar, those employees that get COVID can then sue the employer, not only for negligence in not having proper protocols in place, but also negligent hiring because they brought someone into the workplace who had COVID.
Right. Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So the workers' comp situation, while it's really troublesome for a lot of employers because it does drive up your cost and your rating and impacts your workers' comp premium, it does have a benefit of at least insulating employers from negligence suits and other liability that could come from employees, getting COVID in the workplace.
So what I'm kind of hearing from you, Joseph, is that now because of the increased chance for litigation, workers' comp may be more important than ever.
Correct.
All right, another question, Delia O'Donnell. How do you protect pre-screening questionnaire and medical information under HIPAA?
Well, the protection under HIPAA, first of all, if your HIPAA protections are only only apply under certain circumstances. So not all information gathered by all employers is HIPAA protected. Okay. But medical information in and of itself is something that employers should protect and maintain separately from whatever other records that they keep for their employees. So my advice to you would be the pre-screening screening questionnaires that you use for COVID-related purposes should be information that's only shared with those who have a need to know and who are responsible for operating your COVID protection program, and otherwise properly stored so it doesn't become an issue and get improperly disclosed.
Interesting. We have another question. Apparently, some companies are offering incentives, kind of 2 hours of pay, a fixed dollar amount to get the vaccine. You've seen clients do that, and are there legal exposures from doing that?
No. Well, I'll answer them in order. Yes, clients are doing that. In fact, we're encouraging clients to do that, especially if your program is one where you're not mandating it, but you're encouraging it. All right. If you want people to do it on their own, then you should provide incentives. Give them time off to go do it. Whatever it takes to get people bought into the program. If you're going to go strictly on an encouragement basis as opposed to a requirement basis, right? If you require it, the hammer is that either you do it or you don't keep your job.
Right.
Right. So, you got a little bit more muscle if you're going to require it. If you're just going to encourage it, you need to help employees along.
Right.
You need to get them to better understand why it's in their best interest, why it's in your best interest, and you're willing to work with them as to whatever they need in order to make it happen. If that means time off, your convenient locations for it to happen, whatever you can do to help, encourage them to get the vaccine is certainly going to be helpful.
Now, another question, which is really more a political question. How do you mandate vaccine for public employees and union employees? I guess you can legally do that, but there are political issues around doing that.
Certainly for both public employees and union employees. I mean, I would presume a unionized workforce, and your perfect example is the teachers' unions, right? I would bet the minute a school board mandates the vaccine, that a grievance would be filed and an unfair labor practice charge would be filed with PERC.
Right.
Okay. So yeah, obviously you have the right to do it. That doesn't mean everybody's going to comply, and that doesn't mean that the majority representatives are going to go along with it. You would think that everyone would have the same best interests in mind when it comes to dealing with and addressing the pandemic, but that's not necessarily the case. Especially in the public sector and the school board sector, where school boards and the teachers unions have just been at odds about how to handle the pandemic. Should teachers be back? Should they not be back? So those are issues, obviously, depending upon the sector you're working in, that you're going to have to deal with.
And so you were talking about my mom is actually under hospice care in my house, and so the aid is here. So we're you know so we're
So you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
exactly we know exactly what you're talking about. So now one of the challenges that government will have with the vaccine is that any bad adverse response that somebody has in the middle of nowhere, people will say, hey, so and so got sick from the vaccine, I'm not going to do that. And so you probably have heard of cases, or are you hearing any bad things other than basic allergies or anything?
No, I haven't heard of, and again, it's only been distributed to a limited population.
Right,
Right.
right.
So we haven't had the widespread distribution yet. But from what has been distributed, I'm not hearing anything other than someone had an adverse reaction to it in the form of kind of an allergic reaction.
Right,
Right.
right.
I may have, I'm trying to think if I heard on the news, there may have been a story about someone who may have gotten violently ill as a result of it, but I'm not hearing that a general response or general reaction to it is that people are becoming violently ill, excuse me, or their systems are rejecting it, for some reason. Now, obviously, as it gets more broadly rolled out, I think you're going to see an increase in that. All right. And the question becomes, what is it that we're seeing, and how does that impact people's mentality and approach to the vaccine? Nowadays, you look at the general flu vaccine. All right. I mean, people, millions of people get it, and they all understand that there's a possibility they're going to get sick anyway,
Right.
or they're going to get, have some other kind of adverse reaction to it. But yet people still get it.
Right.
And I think that, the hope is, I think, is that we can get to that same level of acceptance with this vaccine, where people say, okay, I know there's a risk to getting it. I may get sick. I may still get it, even if I get the vaccine, but I'm better off getting the vaccine.
Right, right. In the long run. Well, let's go. You want me to try another page?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, I only put a few slides together because I knew there'd be a lot of discussion just around the few slides. So
this is great. So so some more questions. And people please put them in the chat. So you deal with all sorts of labor issues. You're dealing with basically anything that happens in the workplace.
Correct.
Are there any special protections if you're under 15 employees, if you're under 10 employees? Is there anything in the code or legislation that protects the smaller businesses who just don't have the means to deal with this?
No, in fact, you're with some of the federal legislation that was that was adopted to address the pandemic. There was a push to include some form of liability protection for employers, and so that they didn't have to worry about these issues as to whether they're going to get sued if my employee gets sick or whatever the case may be. But that legislation didn't go anywhere. So there are some of the employment laws do have certain thresholds for which you have to meet before they apply, but the discrimination laws are generally not like that. So when we're talking about the Americans with Disability Act, the Civil Rights Act, the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, those are laws that you can pretty much rest assured if you're operating a business, you're subject to them.
Right, right. And I think that makes sense when it comes to kind of discrimination, but this, and that's usually intentional. That's usually somebody doing something stupid. Yep. And again, this is different in my mind because it's not intentional. I mean, things just happen, and somebody gets in, and I think they're looking, much of the spread is happening in households. People have it, and it's not happening in the workplace. So somebody has it in the household, you come to a 5-person workplace, and then you blame the workplace, and the workplace has to get an attorney.
Absolutely.
They're out of business, and it really is.
No, you're absolutely correct. In fact, I can draw upon my own experience in our firm here. Our firm has been operating, not at full capacity, but we've been doing okay. We've been having people coming in, and we've got different shifts and whatnot. So we're working to keep the firm moving. Notwithstanding, we've been under the restrictions for the last 10 months like everybody else. We've had 0 instances of someone claiming they got COVID here at the workplace. but we have 24 people that caught it at home.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Okay, from a spouse, a brother, a sister, whatever the case may be. So, and I think that's a tribute to the fact that first of all, we do have very strict protocols in place and very comprehensive protocols, following the CDC guidelines and everything that everybody's been told to do for the last 10 months. So, and the fact that we don't have everybody here at the same time. So we're really doing what we can to limit the exposure, the transmission or exposure in the workplace. But you're right. I mean, there's nothing to stop or prevent an employee from getting COVID here in the workplace. And then it's just from there, it's just a liability game. Employees going to claim I got it at work. And then the whole issue becomes, even assuming they did get it at work, is it workers' comp? If it's not workers' comp, you're potentially liable civilly for, because they're going to claim that they got it at work because you didn't do the right things, So look, the best advice to any employer at this time, and I'm assuming that everyone is at least advanced to this point, get your protocols in place, require the physical distancing, require the masks, have employees regularly sanitize their workplace. If they can't do it for them. Right. Make sure that there's plenty of sanitizer around that's conveniently located, in your office. Just do all the things that you can do based upon the guidance that has been provided by the scientific community to make your workplace as COVID-free as possible, because there's no way you're going to stop the spread of the virus. Right. But what you can do is put yourself in a best possible position if something does happen and a claim does get filed against you, where you can defend it by saying, we did all of this stuff. We took all the proper protocols. Here's what we did. Right. Here's what employees were required to do. And, there was nothing else we could do.
So now Don Perriott, who seems to have some expertise, it says COVID is an RNA virus. I didn't even know what an RNA virus is. Like the flu, it's likely to mutate. We're already seeing it mutate around the world now, but it mutates at a quarter of the speed of the flu. Now, can companies require vaccinations periodically? Now, if it's mutating, like every quarter or something. So it's the same, there's not a provision at one.
Nope. Look, if it mutates to the point where a separate vaccine is developed to address the mutating virus, and that developed, comes out 6 months after the first, vaccination was taken, sure. I mean, the law is you can require vaccinations, especially under the auspices of this COVID pandemic. So, that means you can require it once every quarter or whatever it takes for you to assure that you're meeting the scientific community standards.
So let me ask another question. So before in 2019, before the virus and beyond, those folks, including me, who are over 50, it was almost regularly known in the marketplace that if you're over 50, you're unlikely to get a job in somewhere. And I see all sorts of instances, and there's no, you can't really prove. It's very hard to prove. But unless everybody is under 30 and everybody, but there really is age discrimination in the labor market, because I know so many people more qualified, and so I don't know. Are there any age discrimination cases anymore? It doesn't seem like anybody can sue for that, even though most companies are not hiring older people.
Well, interestingly enough, I do still handle or deal with a lot of age discrimination situations. Now, when I say that, not because they get to litigation, right? But we do see it happening pretty regularly in layoffs and reductions in force.
Right.
And what happens is someone will be offered a severance package because they're being released from their company. Okay. And then they'll call me and say, hey, I'm being discharged. I got a severance package. Can you look at it and help me, deal with this? And in the course of that discussion with that person, I can determine whether there is a potential age discrimination issue there, whether their employer is just getting rid of the older folks,
Mhm.
either because they want a younger workforce or the older folks have a tendency to be higher paid. And if I conclude that there's some smoke there,
Right.
then we can use that to try to negotiate a better severance package for that particular employee. So there's believe it or not, there's considerable amount of that going on, but not a lot of age discrimination showing up in the courts.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, age discrimination is really one of the easier things to establish a prima facie case for.
Hmm.
Right? In law, there's, especially in discrimination law, there's kind of a three-part analysis where the employee who's claiming discrimination has to establish certain elements of the case. Then the burden shifts to the employer to show that they took the decision for a non-discriminatory reason. And if they do that, and it shifts back to the employee to prove that that reason is pretext. Right?
Right.
For age discrimination claims, it's very, very easy to get through that prima facie case.
Hmm.
All right. All you have to do is show, you had a job, right? You're in an age protected category. You were performing your work. You got terminated, and they hired somebody younger than you.
Right.
Okay. Now it's once you get there, it's a little difficult to complete the. All right. So, but that in and of itself can get you to a jury. All right. So, which then puts a burden on employers to really kind of settle these cases, which is why most of them do that even before the case reaches the courts. So that's why you're not seeing a lot of them in court.
And Josephina says, so there are a lot of those. I mean, a lot of the ones which can't prove there are the interviews, people who just, you interview.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of folks who are really qualified don't get it. So now
I hear that all the time. And there's, and I'll get calls and people say, I interviewed for a job. I have all the qualifications and, I didn't get the job. And so I have the discussion with them. How old are you? And, and they're like, well, I think I got discriminated because of age. I mean, it's impossible. It's virtually impossible to prove that case.
On the interview. See, that's the so let's talk about travel. So, I have a company. I've had everybody tested, but, we're a sales company and my sales folks have to go out and travel. There are a lot of liabilities with that as well. Have you seen any cases related to that?
Well, interestingly enough, most companies, unless it's absolutely necessary, have pulled back on travel, and are doing even sales calls, like this,
right, on Zoom,
virtually. So, so no, I haven't seen any spike in cases related to travel issues. But obviously, if you do have a workforce where it's imperative that they be out on the road, you've got to take the same precautions. You got to make sure that whoever that person is that's going on the road understands you have protocols in place. That person needs to take the proper protocols to protect him or herself when they're out on the road. All right. And either that's out on the road in an automobile traveling for your benefit, or going on a plane to go to a different state. But we've really seen a substantial decrease in the amount of business travel. In business meetings. And again, when I started out this by saying that I think the pandemic is going to have a lasting impact on the workplace, and I think that's one of the areas where you're going to see a lasting impact. I know even in my business, in the legal profession, I think we're going to have a lasting impact of these virtual type of interactions, even with the court. All right. I mean, used to be that if you had a motion before the court, the lawyers went to the courthouse, you got travel time, you got lawyers sitting in the hallway, and it's a lot of downtime that winds up getting on a client's bill, which is unnecessary. The way it works now is the judge tells you, I'm going to Zoom with you folks at 3:00 on Tuesday. At 3:00 on Tuesday, you're in front of your computer and you get it done. So it's become a much more efficient way to do business. And I think that's going to have a lasting impact.
And we all know how efficient the courts are. Trust me, they are the most inefficient aspect of America. I have never seen. I'm a consultant, so I look at operational, and it's just it's crazy how bad they are. So the
It's the epitome of dysfunction.
yeah, yeah, it really is, and so but speaking of it, because that makes a lot of sense for a lot of things like this session. I mean, we have people from across the country we wouldn't have if we weren't doing Zoom.
Right.
But now they're doing more and more medical analysis on, and that's where, because I can see lawyers doing it. I don't quite see the doctor online. I want you to really look at me.
Yeah.
You can't see me on Zoom. So I
No.
don't know if there's any, with issues around that you've seen or heard of related to kind of medical diagnoses and other things remotely.
Well, I haven't seen that, particularly from an employment standpoint. Okay. But I can tell you, if I was a physician, I would be much less inclined to do virtual visits for fear that I'm missing something, which could therefore result in a medical malpractice claim. Right? It's very hard for a lawyer to commit professional malpractice in a Zoom call.
Right.
But
right.
I think the potential for a medical professional to do so in a Zoom call is much more likely or possible, because as you've indicated, I don't think you get the same feel as to what's going on with your patient if you can't see the patient in front of you. I mean, again, I'm not a physician, but that's just my general view of it.
And so and Tony, I apologize. I didn't look up there to see if you were there, but this is the time. So Tony Russo, for those who don't know, is the president of CIA&J. He's a partner in this, one of the best advocates for small and large businesses in New Jersey. Tony, do you think your members have any questions about this? Or?
Yeah, first, thank you, Dale. And Joe, this was a great hour, a lot of useful information.
Perfect.
But when I've talked to members that have gotten vaccinated, whether they're human resources professionals or managers, their concern is even if you get the vaccine, you could still be a carrier of the virus.
Yeah.
So you may have to still get tested, still wear masks. So I don't know if that's come up and how people are going to address that. So it's kind of interesting that, even though people get vaccinated, you still may have to get tested.
Yeah, and that's part of, when you talk about people being reluctant to get vaccinated, I mean, that's part of the mix that goes into it, because there's no guarantee once you get vaccinated, A, you're not going to carry, B, you're not going to get it. All right. So even getting vaccinated, you're subject to the same protocols. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but I still think that we need to get it to a place where, notwithstanding all of the burdens that come along with getting vaccinated, meaning it doesn't mean you can just throw everything else aside and go back out and get back to normalcy, which was, fall of 2019. All right. That's not going to happen. But what we're hopeful about is that if everybody does eventually get vaccinated, or a majority of people get vaccinated, we are going to see a decline in the transmission rate. Folks won't need to wear masks as often as they do right now, and we can get back to some level of normalcy. But right now, you're absolutely correct. You get the vaccine, there's no difference. You're still wearing a mask. And then you've got to figure also, I'm sorry, Anthony, let me just finish, Tony. If you do get vaccinated, that doesn't mean, if you go into a workplace and everybody else hasn't been vaccinated, you're still going to have to put the hazmat suit on, because
right.
There's really no protection there.
And so I'm just wondering if the trend, right, if the technology is there, that you could see employers maybe, using rapid COVID tests where, you come into a shop or you go in, you take the test, right, a saliva test, and you get the results in 15 minutes.
Absolutely. I see that if those rapid tests become that available, where employers, right now, most employers, as part of the protocol, when you visit their office, especially, I know here in our own office, if clients come in, they got to fill out a questionnaire, they have to have temperature check. All right. So a natural extension of that protocol would be a rapid test if it becomes that readily available, that employers can use it for either their workforce or for visitors. Yeah. That's
great.
I think that's clearly a potential down the road.
Thank you.
One of the things, and we're coming up at the end, but this is something I know is of concern to Tony's members and, the litigation side of this. And I know, Joseph, you're not an insurance guy, but, how maybe, and Tony, maybe we need to lobby government for some kind of subsidy for the legal costs for a small business under 25 people. But even if they're in the right, even if they did everything right, Joseph, as you know, they say you can sue a ham sandwich.
Correct.
So, the people can be suing these small businesses and they just can't afford to do that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on, or if you've seen anything in any other states where they've provided some subsidy for smaller businesses to deal with legal costs.
I have not seen that in any of my travels, but I do know from, again, when I talk about the home care companies that I do a lot of work with, they have that concern because just like the hospice worker who's with you, Dr. Caldwell, they put people in someone's home, right? If that caregiver in the home has it infects the client, all right, then you've got an issue where the client wants to sue the employer because the employer sent an infected caregiver into the home, right? And that could be, become very, very costly litigation. Now, the question becomes whether the employer's general liability policy would cover that. Right. And what we are seeing is insurance carriers are pushing back on covering COVID-related liability claims. All right. Because they realize that if the floodgates open, it's going to just get out of control. So this is why there was talk in DC about employer liability protection, from these types of claims. And so I agree. Anything that your organization, your group can do, to kind of push that cause along, I think it's a worthwhile cause because especially for small employers, one claim and you're done. You can be wiped out.
So I can tell you, Joe, that we've been advocating for that, other business groups, since spring, and unfortunately at the state level, there's no appetite for it. And we were just told very candidly that that's not something that they want to do.
Yeah, and that's been the problem. But even at the state and federal level, they just don't have the appetite for it.
Yeah.
Well, Joseph, we're at time. I have Tony, anything legislatively that you'd like to bring up? It's going to be interesting going forward, new administration. So we'll see.
Yep. Right.
We will see. But Joseph, this has been fantastic. A lot of good questions. And so I really thank you. And if people want to reach out to you, what's your website, web address, phone number?
The web address is actually, if it's not on the presentation, usually it's on the presentation. My email address is jmj@spsk.com.
Oh, nice.
Very simple. jmj@spsk.com.
Perfect.
Anyone that wants to follow up and reach out to me and has a follow-up question, I'd be more than happy to respond. And also, Dr. Caldwell, I'd be more than happy to do a follow-up session 30 days or 60 days down the road as we get a little further into the vaccines and how it's being handled by employers. So if you'd like to do that, you just let me know.
Well, we may do that. I have a show called Family Business World. Tony was a star on the show. Every week we have that, so we may bring you on to give
Just
some of the.
let me know. Whatever you need, I'm available.
But thank you all for watching this week. And Joseph, Tony, as always, thank you so much. And have a great weekend, everybody.
Likewise, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Everybody.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.